Oh,
There we go. So
okay.
good afternoon.
Good evening.
Yeah, I guess. So to start off with, would you just like to say your name and where you are?
My name is Mary Ann Kraus, and I'm in Shaker Heights or Cleveland, Ohio, United States.
Okay. And the first big question is, who are you? Who are you as a person, as a human being? And that can be anything from your passions, your values, the things that really move you in life, or whatever you'd like to talk about.
Hmm. Hmm. It's one of those questions that you could answer in 1,000 ways. Um, so I'll just have to pick one. I'd say I am I'm a sister and a mother and an aunt and a partner and a friend and a colleague. Um, I think it's those relationships probably that mark most of who I am. Um, that I feel like it's almost a little hard for me to speak about myself, not so much in a role, but in relationship. Without being in relationship, it's like I feel a little bit uh, um, like a hermit, like an isolated being or something. So I think I'd say that that's who I am is and I love those relationships. I try to care for them and keep them watered. Um, and I guess the other who I am is I'm I'm an outdoors person. I love the water. I love stand-up paddleboarding. I love kayaking. I love swimming, body surfing, snorkeling. Give me water and I'm a go. Um, I love biking.
I'm just trying to figure out where you can do those things around Cleveland.
I know I have to travel a lot. I mean, we do have a lake, but I wouldn't actually go in this lake here. I'm a rower. I'm on a rowing team in Cleveland on the Cuyahoga River, which was the river that caught on fire 20 years ago, but it's much better now.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they've cleaned it up a bit. Yeah, so I just love like water sports, adventure, backpacking, traveling. If you give me a ticket, I'll go anywhere. Which is the pandemic has been a challenge.
Mhm. Hmm.
So,
So what about in terms of your values? Would you say that there's like a particular set of values or something that you really organize yourself around?
I'd say I probably organize myself around maybe two things come to mind around uh, relationships with and just once I feel a connection, I really work hard to try to keep it alive. It just feels like lifeblood both ways. And I think the other is around issues of social justice. Um, I think from my background, from growing up as a kid in a working class blue collar Irish Catholic family as a girl. um, I think that early on, what started to catch my attention was uh, how does a world, a society, a culture construct you, and what are the limitations of that? And I think at an early age, I started feeling the constrictions of that, and I think that's guided my passions about what matters. If I'm going to be putting some energy into something in this world, what matters? It's trying to kind of find those ways that we constrict ourselves and each other, and trying to kind of challenge them, blow them out, deconstruct them.
Hmm. Okay. So from that background, from that early context, does anything come to mind as an event or as a set of circumstances that you'd like to say a bit more about that really shaped you or influenced you somehow?
There's one that comes to my mind that I think it's related to this. I think um, uh, I was always closer to my dad. He was kind of my parent and he was kind of a was pretty nonverbal family, low emotionality. He was a pipe fitter. And my mom at that point in time, although she changed in her later life, was a very conforming, let's follow the rules kind of person. And I was in 8th grade and I was really bored in class one day. I was in Catholic school. And I was just, looking at my fellow students and just writing down what animal I thought they looked like. So-and-so looks like a horse, so-and-so looks like a dog, and I put it in my desk. And of course, in Catholic school, nothing is private. So the nuns went through my desk at night and found the note and then made me read it publicly to the class the next day. So of course, all my friends felt criticized, like I was calling them a horse or a dog, and it was not at all. It was just a creativity exercise. We did it at home, my mom and I, a lot, just kind of like, what's this pickle look like? What's this shape look like? So it got totally misinterpreted. I think it really created a terrible rupture in my friendships. In my class, and I remember I was sent home from school. My mother came to pick me up. She said, "No, wait till your father gets home." So my father came home from, pipe fitting, dirty, whatever. And my mother says, "I have something I have to tell you." And sitting down, it's one of those serious conversations. And my mother tells him these things that the nun said, that I had done. And my father looks at my mother and says, "What's the big deal?" And in that moment, I felt freed from, oh, authority is just a perspective. It's just a voice. It's not the truth. And I felt like he opened a window for me into the world that I have stepped through. And I will always thank him for not being a conforming dad and challenging those rules about, be it about gender or class or authority.
Wow. Okay. And what about people? Would you say that there's a particular person who's had a major influence on you as a person?
Wow, there's so many. So I could just, I would say the first time I saw my son after he was born, and I was the kind of woman where I thought, I don't know if I want to have kids or not. I don't know. I think I do. I'm not sure. I want my career, and I was a late in life mom. And when I birthed him and held him for the first time, I looked at him, and it was like the world changed. And I just thought, oh my God, what was I thinking? It just, whatever I'd been carrying just dissolved, and the world changed. So his birth, his presence had a profound impact on me. So if I go then to my dad had a profound influence in that way, that he was a leader for to speak out and to not feel afraid to speak out. I'd say my first psychology professor, who I was drifting in college looking for history. I was looking for how do I find out about people's stories? I was in history and I thought, no, this isn't working out. So I went into art, and I didn't think I was good enough to make it as an artist. So I had to take a psychology class. I ended up in a developmental psychology class with this professor, and all of a sudden it just came to life, like this sense of like, oh my God, the interiors of people. Oh my, and I just fell in love with psychology, with people, and thought, oh, this is a kind of work you can do in the world. So he had a profound influence on me. Gosh, I'd say the two men who were the heads of my graduate program when I went for my doctorate. One was a Black psychologist, and the other was a white psychologist, and they were best friends. And they decided to form a graduate school in the United States. This was probably 35 years ago. But they said psychology should be not to train people for private practice. It should be to train people to work with the community. So it was a community clinical psychology program, and I found those two men so inspiring in terms of their values and what they did in constructing this program that brought together people across race, across class, and that was foundational for me.
Can I ask where that program was?
It was in Dayton at the School of Professional Psychology. I'd say at the Institute, I think there were a number of people that, and I think that's why I centered from the Institute, was my original trainers like Sonia Nevis and Joseph Zinker and Ed Nevis, who I thought was like my first mentor, who I'd never been mentored. I never knew what it meant. And to have someone reach out and say, I think I see something in you that you might not see. And the power of that touch or that point. And I think there'd just be so many. I could sit like they feel like I stand on shoulders, they sit behind me. There's so many people, Lynn Jacob, Gordon Wheeler, Jim
Yeah,
Kepner.
this is the life flashes before your eyes.
Exactly. It's like, how do you say thank you to all those, people?
Yeah. Okay. So another slightly more personal question about yourself is how you experience or understand yourself within your gender or as a woman.
Oh, that is a great question. Wow. I think that has been one of the, for me, part of a life journey and one of the most interesting journeys. I think I was born a kid who probably at about age 8 or 9 thought like, I know there's boys and girls. I'm not a boy. I don't really feel like a girl. I'm something else. I'm just a person. And I didn't quite know how to find myself in that range. And I think that, as I think now there's language and, to really understand that. I think, thank God for this last generation who has done all the queer movement and being able to kind of bring forward the sense of, non-gender conforming women, gender fluid, just to say, maybe these fucking pardon my French, these categories are wrong. And we're forcing ourselves into these boxes that may fit for some percentage of people, but probably don't fit for a lot of us. And we're working to kind of stretch ourselves into this box. So I feel like I tried to find ways. I call myself a tomboy, I'm non-gender conforming. And then I think in my 30s, I took, being at the Institute, another woman and I, Rosanna Zavarella, and I did a series of workshops for about 10 years on women's development across the lifespan. And I think it was a search for me to try to find a definition of woman, if I had to be in that category, that was broad enough to hold all of that, to hold, characteristics that are not feminine, female, but to say, yeah, we are the whole range. So I think that was my attempt to try to say, if I have to fit this category, let me stretch the category, but I'd rather the categories be gone, actually, and be descriptive.
So after doing those workshops for 10 years, have you understood anything that you can articulate, or is it just really a broadening and deepening of your experience? Is there something that sort of stuck with you and you went, oh, I've got this now, I can stop doing these workshops?
Yeah, well, I think I found enough, like we used a lot of goddess imagery from a number of cultures to kind of lay out the polarities and the range and depth for women around the possibilities of expression as women, from Durga to, lots of, from home and hearth to, fight or fierce to, so it felt like I was able to populate the entire range of experiences with these goddesses that I said, yes, these are reflections of what it could be to be a woman. So I felt like I found enough spaces that I didn't feel the constrictions as much. So yeah, I think, and that was when I kind of put it down for a while. I felt like that was a good decade. That was a good learning for me. I feel free to kind of express myself as I want without feeling like I've gone outside the lines.
Okay. Okay, so another question, I don't ask this to everybody, but I am curious, is how you experience your privilege and your power, how you understand yourself sort of in that social world.
God, my privilege and my power. I think, as many people, I came to it first as a woman and a person of working class to understand power from underneath and seeing when other people had it and I didn't. And I think it's been in the last, it feels iterative in the last 30 years, but especially in the last 10 years to really get a sense of, as a white person, what it means to have privilege and power. Um, I think it's been kind of a gradual, but I'd say in the United States, a recently profound um, unearthing of the extent and depth of power and privilege of white people in the United States. So I feel like at this point, the work is now for me as a person of privilege to look at that side of it. I feel like I spent the first 30 or 40 years understanding around class and gender, what it meant to come from under power to, and now I feel like I'm really looking at, and in the United States, again, it really is different, I think, than in the rest of the world. I think not that there isn't um, racism and colorism around the world, but in the United States, we have a particularly awful cataclysmic meeting of slavery and colonization. And I think that like recently I was just doing some biking in Alabama and Georgia. I've never been to the South really, but it was a way to get to the warm weather during the pandemic and away from people. And while I was there, I went to the Museum for Equality and Justice, which is a new museum that has a parcel of land nearby that has the lynching memorial. And I've got to say, it was the most profound experience that I have had of understanding systemic racism in the United States. And I think that every child in the United States should, have 2 hours of their education be going through this museum. That it was the best laid out understanding of the experience of Black people in the United States, from being kidnapped, to being terrorized through lynching, to being then segregated through Jim Crow, to now being incarcerated, and that it just continues. And I think we've seen that in all the recent, thank God for video phones and being able to kind of see the extent of police violence against people of color and Black people. And so I think I am coming more and more to understand my privilege, that I don't have to think about all those things that my friends who are Black have to deal with every minute of every day. And part of it is then like, so now once you have awareness, then you're responsible. So then the question is, what do we do?
Okay. And another aspect of yourself that I'm curious about is your age. How do you experience where you are in life right now, chronologically?
I love the way you ask your questions. Because I've had this dialogue with people, because I've celebrated birthdays recently. I say, do not say the number. I do not want a number. I don't want an objective categorization of how people make meaning of that from the outside. I want my age to be experienced from the inside. So I think of how much life experience I've had. How am I feeling in my body? How vital do I feel? So at least at this point, now it may be different if my body begins to give out in certain ways, but at this point, I feel like the chronology of it feels only oppressive, and I don't even want to think about it. I want to just pay attention to my experience of vitality of this life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I am curious about, is the experience of it, not the number. So yeah. Yeah, thank you. So switching up a little bit, I'm also wondering how you met Gestalt, how you guys got together, what the relationship with Gestalt has been like.
How I met Gestalt. I met Gestalt. I came to. I'd been in a graduate program for women's studies, psychology and sociology of women in power, because I wanted to understand. It was my first beginning to deconstruct gender. So I was in that program, and one of my placements was in a counseling center. So I thought, oh, I really like this. And again, I discovered it in college that this man was doing therapy. I thought, oh, maybe I could so I came to Cleveland to do a master's in clinical community psychology, which is how I ended up in Cleveland. Otherwise, I never would have come here. I had a choice of two programs. One was in California, one was in Cleveland. And I was in Boston at the time, and I didn't have enough money to get a ticket to California to interview. So I came to Cleveland. which
The
someday,
water sports probably would have worked out a little bit
yeah,
better in
I think that
California.
was definitely a big miss, but I would not have found the institute in Cleveland, which actually has probably become um, the biggest support for development in my life. So anyways, I was in Cleveland. I was in in my master's program, and the woman who was doing the groups program um, had trained at the institute. So she didn't just teach groups. Of course, she did a group, and that was like new for me as a young graduate student. And she was doing these groups. I thought, what is she seeing? So after class, after I said, like, I want to know what you know. I want to see how you see. And she said, well, go down the street to the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland and take a class. And so I went down there, took an intro, and I was hooked. I just felt like the combination of the phenomenological, paying attention to, and creating a sense of authenticity of self in relation to, extending and enhancing contact with others was like right up my alley. It was just like water to a thirsty girl.
Hmm. And what is it that you have really stayed with? Because I'm assuming this didn't happen a couple of years ago. So what is it that has really kept your interest around Gestalt? How have you grown with that, or how has that process been?
I'd say two things. One is I after I finished my training at the institute, I did it right after I overlapped with my graduate program. So I was pretty young. I was in my early 20s when I did it. Worked in community mental health for 4 years, and then thought, Gestalt is helpful, but there's other maps, there's other ways that people work, and I want to understand that, and I want to be able to translate across. So I went back um, to graduate school and got my doctorate and studied, everything but Gestalt, because Gestalt wasn't really showing up in graduate programs. So I studied, family systems work, strategic family therapy, cognitive behavioral, analytic. I came back and did my internship in a psychoanalytic institute because I wanted to understand, how do you translate across these systems? And it felt to me like, as a therapist, that as opposed to us coming from any one school of therapy, and then the client has to adapt to that we should know a number of schools, a number of approaches, a number of ways to look at the elephant and see what fits for the person. So, so I came back to Cleveland after having done a number of dives into different approaches. And I came back to the Institute, and what I realized was that it was the most human place of all the approaches I had studied, the one that felt most relationally right for me, that it respected the integrity of the person on the other side. It respected that they had the resources available within themselves or their communities to kind of develop and grow. It felt like it was a therapy of the heart. So I felt like this feels like the place I can center from. And these other approaches that I've learned, at times they can feel like they will inform, in the way that Gestalt's so beautiful, it leaves it open to saying what emerges in the present between you. So these other approaches have provided just other, sometimes maps or ways of working, but it's centered in that, in the relationality of Gestalt, to another person as another human being, and not an objectification of them or a categorization of them, but a self of them. So I think that's what sold me, and that's what brought me um, home to Gestalt. And then the second thing was that once I got to the Institute and was studying, I found the ways that the other faculty related to me as a student, and then as I became a young faculty person, I felt a qualitatively different sense of connection and contact, and I grew in the face of that. And I thought, there's something. It's like Jack and the Beanstalk. There's something magic about this in terms of how this supports growth and development. So that I was then hooked. I just thought that's my center.
Mhm. And so what have you done with it? What is it that you would say stands out sort of in your practice or in your projects? How have you taken this in and created something with it?
I'd say probably the areas that I feel like if I look to step back and say, like, where do I kind of have my handprints, or have I wanted to I'd say it mostly has to do with, I think I've liked working with, um, although I enjoy working individually one-to-one, I think I've always had an interest in, I like working a lot with couples. I like working a lot with groups. I like working with community. Um, so I think that there's something about for me about bringing the kind of Gestalt principles, way of being, way of working, way of understanding to slightly larger than one person systems, like two-person systems and beyond. Um, some of the work that I've done has been with a group called Seeds of Peace, which is a group that brings young people and community leaders from the Middle East, from Israel, Palestine, Egypt, and Jordan. Takes them every summer, a group to a camp in Maine because you can't meet in the Middle East because you can't cross the borders there. So the premise is that by having 3.5 weeks of intense residential dialogue cross religion, cross country, cross conflict area, the hope is to build some real contact and some real relationships for the kids with each other who will be the future leaders in the Middle East, and for some of these community leaders who are there to support the young people. So my work was to work with the community leaders. I had the gift to be able to do that for 3 summers, to spend 3.5 week blocks residentially with these community leaders from the Middle East, and to use for me everything that I had learned in Gestalt about what supports contact, what self-supports, and what interpersonal supports really support contact. And I think that that there was something about what happened in that program when we brought some Gestalt orientation that I think deepened it. And so that's just an example of a place where I think when I have the opportunity to move some of this toward community, I think that's what really lights me up. There were a number of us from the Institute who had worked on the organizational side of the house. Even though I started out on the clinical side, I kind of have a foot in each house because I'm kind of a clinical community psychologist. So a number of folks from the organizational side and I formed a group. This is probably about, maybe 20 years ago. And decided to kind of, our Gestalt was our base, but we decided to cross-teach each other everything that we knew that was kind of cutting edge. And then we, for 10 years, did programs in not-for-profits around the country to support not-for-profits to have their staffs kind of come to understand their own worldviews and the worldviews of their constituents in a way to support better contact. So it was a combination of Gestalt methodology with some other maps and tools. And it was a great teaming effort. So I love working with the community, but I've also loved building teams or being part of teams that really work. I think I've been parts of teams that haven't worked. And
we all have.
Haven't we all? But there's something to me that feels like it does almost feel like the high points of life to have felt like in the groups program at the Institute. I think there have been some programs there that have just sung because the team, the faculty who have taught together have really created a real team, and it sings together. So it sings for the community. And I had the same feeling with the Dream Partners group. So I think it's that kind of probably groups and larger systems that really, really sing for me.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, it lights you up. It does, actually. Yeah. So I am wondering how you would say all of this Gestalt stuff has affected you as a person.
Oh my God, I don't even, I could even say, I would be a different person. I feel like I came out of my family, and through standard education, I would have come out a pretty, kind of high achieving two-dimensional person, which is, and I think it's affected me profoundly. I think it's left me knowing myself better. It's left me trusting myself better. It's supported me to find my voice. It's supported me to engage in conflict and stay on the field in a way that has really grown me. It's supported me to feel like I could support and mentor others. Um, um, it's left me feeling not crazy about some unique ways that I was. Like when I first started at the Institute in my first year of the program, Joseph Zinker was one of our faculty. And I remember thinking like, here I was this working class kid. I just kind of think I was out of my element. I was trying to find my way into this middle class world of, Gestalt and white people. And, I just didn't quite know if I fit. I always felt like a little on the outside. So we were in the middle of a group and he was working with me about something. And I was a very visual thinker at that point in time, extremely visual. It's like things just occurred and emerged visually. And as I painted it out for him, he said, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, that's probably a really regressive quality. That's probably really an early kind of primitive process or something. And he looked, he said, wow, he said, I wish I could think like that. And all of a sudden, something that I had felt was like maybe bad or not good or not developed, he could forward it and say, oh, no, value that. That's really useful. And I think because of that, I was able to like say, oh, that way that I think, oh, maybe it's not like everyone else's always, but it's not bad, and trust it. So I think that's an example just of it giving me a trust in myself. And I think that's what we do for others. We, in all the beautiful colors and ways that we are in the world. I think Gestalt.
And that is such a Gestalty way of valuing the difference and just being with it and appreciating it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm struck by like the nuns and Joseph Zinker.
Yes, and so I love that you said that because it feels like I probably wouldn't have loved the Joseph Zinker intervention had I not had the nuns. There's
Right.
something about that both that polarity of constriction. You don't have the bust out if you don't have the constriction. So there's something I'm valuing about both sides.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you've mentioned a lot about sort of the Institute and that community, but I'm wondering, do you feel like you're a part of a Gestalt community? What does that phrase mean to you, or what does it even refer to?
That is really interesting. This is where I am of a split heart. I feel immensely connected to the Gestalt Cleveland community and to the people who have come through there. And when I first started going to other Gestalt, this is back a long time, and I think things have really changed. This is back when the Gestalt Journal were the only conferences that were around. AAGT had not yet been born. It was just on the cusp of AAGT being born. And I remember going to these things and thinking, oh my God, the politics and the power are so aversive. Like, these are not my people. This is not where I want to play. So I stopped going. I just thought that's not the place. Just like when I used to go to psychology conferences and there were psychologists, I thought, I'm a psychologist, but these are not my people. They don't think the way I think. This is not my people. Yeah. So I stopped going to Gestalt conferences. When AAGT started, they had one in Cleveland and I went to one or two and I thought, oh, this is better. But it's still, for me, it was, there was too much ego and too much power and too much status. And it was just distracting. I felt like, I'm not going to learn here. This is not, I don't want to play. I don't want to play. And there's better places for me to spend my time. So I actually spent my time, I'd say my community around Gestalt is more like Gestalt as part of a worldview. And I think there's other places that also participate in that worldview that I probably feel more aligned, certain spiritual practices or whatever. So I feel attached to Cleveland. I feel attached to people who I, have studied with other places like, Judith Hemming and Malcolm Perlett and Reinhard Fehr. So there's people from other places who I've connected with. But I think it's at those general meetings, it just didn't do it for me. So in that way, I don't feel connected to the larger community. And I feel a little envious, actually, as I hear the international AAGT community, and I hear a little bit through Marlene Blumenthal about that. And I think, oh,
Yeah, I don't think we always bring out the best in each other in those circumstances either.
And that puzzles me. Like, why not? We should be able to do that better. that's to me what Gestalt, we should be able to do that better. Not
We
perfect.
should have better parties. We should have way better parties when we all get together.
See, I don't know about those parties, but I must say at the
No, that's what I mean. Like the conferencey, geeky, gestalty kind of, yeah.
yeah, it's like at the institute we used to have yearly. We don't now recently, but in the beginning we had yearly staff meetings, and we come together and we co-teach each other things that we were learning that were developmental ed. And we have a great party on Saturday night, and we probably had maybe 15 years of great parties. And then the institute started to fracture, and we have all the same political stuff everybody else does. But those parties were so bonding, just to dance wildly together for 4 hours. And exactly, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So what would you consider some of the challenges that you've run up in? And you can talk about this either in other aspects of your life, just from your worldview, or within Gestalt itself. Like what have been the big challenges for you?
What have been the big challenges for me?
I get the impression you kind of get excited about the challenges, and you may actually enjoy them, but
No, I do actually. I probably seek them out actually, because I do feel like those are the places that I have grown the most. Yeah, I won't even say more, but at our institute, there are a couple people where, there was significant challenge based on maybe different ways we saw the world or whatever. And what I appreciated over time was that even though sometimes we were diametrically opposed on some things, for me, at least in Cleveland, there was the capacity for people to stay on the field with each other and to keep talking or butting it out. So I learned that there. So challenges, God, I feel like challenges. It's like, again, which ones would I?
well, I mean, literally, you've already gone through peace processes in the Middle East. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
So challenges in my own life, again, you probably the one I talked about was about, gender. That was a challenge. I think challenges to for me to not go the way that a working class girl so many years ago was supposed to go, which is you get married, you have kids, you kind of follow your husband, blah, 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 blah. So it felt like a bit of like leaving the island back then, and kind of saying, I'm going to forge my own path. And it's kind of scary because I don't kind of know what's out here. So that felt like a challenge. I think that, again, the challenge this is a challenge. The challenge to me of taking what I think Gestalt has to offer, what I think it's done for me, that I know it's done for others. I mean, it's the beauty of teaching in a training program, is you hear from participants how much it's affected them in their world, and it passes on. It's like, how to support us to look at our flat sides, to not be so parochial, to look at how we are caught in status and power sometimes, to look at how we are exclusive and not inclusive. So that to me is a big challenge for Gestalt. And I think we're, again, in this I'll have to say, I'm speaking probably from a smaller worldview of Gestalt than you have, being in the international organization. So I bow to the international world on this. I really don't know, but I'd say my experience in the United States, at least, is that I don't think we have manifested in the world Gestalt in the way that I think is as powerful as our way is. I think we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot. And I would love us to kind of, so one of the challenges is, can we step back and say, how come we don't have more Black people in Gestalt in the United States? How come we don't have more people working class in Gestalt in the United States? How come we're mostly going into private practice and we're not somehow in the community in other ways in the United States? So the challenge to me is, I think Gestalt is supposed to be, and Maureen O'Hara wrote an article about this maybe 20 years ago, it's supposed to be an emancipatory psychology. And I think we've fallen short. That I think people experience the personal transformation, and there's probably some small area, but I think we have bigger potential, and I think it's frustrating to me that we're not blossoming that.
Yeah, emancipation is a very lofty aspiration.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. That's not happening.
Yeah, and I think we have the roots of it, and I think we just have gotten a little diverted. And not everyone. There's people working in the field that
Mhm.
aren't. But and maybe your this interview series will start to surface some of those people who are doing the other things. I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe you'll let me
We'll
know.
see. We'll see. Yeah. Huh. Okay. So what about the flip side of that? And actually, I'm kind of interested in asking this in a couple different ways. You can answer as you would like.
Sure.
But what comes to mind as a highlight, like either a clinical achievement or a particular relationship with a client, with a student, with a situation that comes to mind as this was meaningful, this worked, and this stays with you? So
Mm,
I don't want to say achievement because it makes it sound like a thing that you put on a shelf, but
I
it's sort of
appreciate.
one of those peak experiences
No, I
in
appreciate. I
what you
appreciate.
do.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your languaging of that. Because I think for me, I don't think I ever think about, especially individual work or group work. I never. It doesn't feel like an achievement to me. And then the one example that comes to mind is, again, it feels like a collaboration. So the one that pops to mind, of the probably thousands, is, it was in a training group at the Institute. It was at the mid-year workshop, which means we take the participants who are in the program and we mix them into different groups, different personal development groups. So they're with a new group, even though they know the people from the program, for an intensive weekend. So um, we were in this group. There were about 12 or 13 folks, and a woman who was probably about 55. Um, I don't know if she was a minister or there was something kind of, or in a not-for-profit, but she was 55, and she was talking about that she had been sexually abused when she was younger and had kind of closed off her, um, her erotic self, her female self, her uh, sense of attractiveness, being attracted or attracted. She just had shut it down and kind of gone along through her life. And at 55, she was sitting there saying, I can see where this came from. I know why I have guarded. Um, and I'm 55 and I'm almost done. And I don't want to go through life not feeling that. And it was so poignant. So we're sitting in a group, and again, sometimes as a facilitator, I feel a bit more like we're all in it. We're all in the field together. Sometimes I feel a bit more like a collaborator, choreographer than a therapist. So we're sitting there, and just inquire, this one gentleman in the group who was probably 30 years younger than her. He might be 25, maybe 28. And he said, I'd like to see if I could say something to you. And I think I'll never forget this moment. So she's sitting there, 55, saying, like, I'm almost done. I'm almost dying. And I've never had this experience. And this 25-year-old man threaded the needle of walking between feeling objectified with a sexual abuse history and all that guardedness, and this longing for the vitality of eros and feeling attractive, and feeling that energy and not feeling. It was like I thought, I didn't know how he was. I was kind of sitting there thinking, oh boy, here we go. And he just threaded that needle with his contact with her in a way that she felt his attraction to her in a erotic but safe way. I'd have chills talking about it now. I mean, I thought how this young man did this. And she felt the contact and he felt received. And there were a group of women who were sitting around her, supporting her and it just was like, it felt like a sculpture I wanted to kind of make, just like, let's I wanted to hold it for her to take home. So I think that's one moment that stands out to me, is the beauty of when we are just present with each other and we can kind of get in the field of each other and get kind of, I don't know what it is. It's like we let go of the rational mind and we're just we're in the territory that we know how to move sometimes, and we can feel it. And then you know when it lands. So
Yeah, it's not technical. It's aesthetic and it's felt and it's
yes.
yeah, it's everything.
Yes.
Oh. Okay, so I'm running out of questions.
I hear your baby.
No, that's not true. No, that's my dog just going crazy. You've got the dogs going crazy now too. So you've talked fairly clearly about potential in Gestalt, but I'm curious about what's next for you. Where are you going with this? What's in your plans? What would you like to do? Wow, you just focused on something way ahead of you there. That was kind of crazy.
What?
Your eyes were just like, oh yeah, I can see something.
Your questions, I'm just trying to take them in and just see like what occurs to me. I think one thing that what's next for me is that in Cleveland, which is my family of the heart, and where I've grown up and what has grown me, that I feel like we're in the process of just beginning a development program for the next generation. So it's kind of sweet. I don't know how it's going to work. It's a bit of an experiment, but in this virtual time that we're, inviting a number of people to come together to we're trying to kind of create a community of these new people. We're trying to kind of play with some keynoting of some key issues in classic Gestalt and contemporary Gestalt, and to get people kind of engaged around them. And then everyone will come up with some kind of a project that they are wanting to work on that will be presented at the end, so that they'll get to see each other's work, be it a idea, a paper, a theory, a workshop design, enactment in a group. So we're hoping to kind of bring together a next generation
to like an incubator.
Exactly, to help them bond, to create a little bit of an incubator for what are some of what's their passion that they might want to develop in Gestalt. So I'm really excited about kind of supporting the creation of that next generation in Cleveland. So that's one thing. Another thing, I feel like I'm not there yet. I've been saying for the last 2 or 3 years, like that's the little mantra in my mind, like what's next? And usually I get a sense of like something that really, like that women's series of workshops that I just dive into, or the dream partners, kind of the worldviews. So I've been waiting for what's next for me. So it feels like it has something to do with kind of communities, and with, again, how do we expand our Gestalt community in terms of inclusiveness? How do we look at and see who is it that we are that's not inclusive, not inviting? So I want to understand that and see what we can do. We're partly trying to do that in this invitational, is to try to expand our range of who we're inviting to. It's a little bit like, I think, what Gestalt Voices are doing, which is trying to kind of say we need to make our field more diverse of people, of voices, which is probably what you're doing as well, is bringing a lot of voices together and out. So I have that. It has something to do with that, something to do with within Gestalt, but it's also taking Gestalt more into the community. And I don't know what the forms of that will be yet, but I think that's kind of where
that's happening.
I have a little something, but I don't have the form yet.
That sounds really exciting, actually. Okay. So is there anything else that, I don't know, that you would ask yourself, or that you feel like is missing, to sort of give this little piece of who you are and what you're doing? And
I think what I just say, and I probably have said it a little bit, is that I do think Gestalt I think that our theory is probably kind of strong. I don't think we're quite a theory, but our model, our mappings, our ways of being, I do think that we enact and we point to, I think, what are important developmental trajectories. I think that there's something about our capacity to hold polarity and to be able to, particularly in this world, be able to say, oh, it's not either or, it's, oh, it's both. And not only is it both, but actually both are kind of, they're connected to each other and they're kind of important for each other. It's like we were just saying about like, the Joseph Zinker intervention for me about, oh, is like with the nuns. It's like without the nuns and that kind of restriction, that burst out doesn't have as much meaning. So there's something about being able to hold the whole of things and to not, in the United States is a great example of polarization. It's like to be able to hold both sides of things together simultaneously and to see that they have meaning for each other. I think that is it's embedded in our theory, and I think it's what the world needs. And I would like to see us bringing that forward in, I think we do in therapy, in communities and training. I just would like to see more of the manifestation of what's in our model that I think is about evolution and is about justice and evolution. So that's one thing I'd say. And I think the other thing is that I do think that our approach about wholeness and about the ways in which as we compartmentalize things, that we break things down into parts, that we, we start out as those are kind of useful lies that, like, oh yeah, gender, let's do gender, male, female, that's a useful lie. But at a certain point, we have to see that it's kind of a lie because it actually is broken up what might be a more ongoing continuum. So I think Gestalt has the capacity in a culture that is extremely categorical. It's a rational mindset, categorical culture. The DSM, let's put little categories. We have the capacity, I think, to begin to break those up. And I think that I'd like to see us being able to do that more in the world, not just because I think we do it in our own practice, but I'm not sure that we're having as much influence in the world about that as we could.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Those are really great questions. And they were very, I was surprised. I was expecting them to feel like narrowing, and they actually weren't. They felt really expanding, the questions that you asked.
Well, thank you. So is it okay with you if we leave it here then?
That sounds great. Thank you.